I think positive role models is something that's very interesting in Stoicism, because obviously these Stoic thinkers, a lot of them, even for Marcus Aurelius, they had died before he was around. So there was one quote that you put in the book, which is take on the colour of dead men. Mm-hmm. I thought that was such a good quote, because it's about learning from those who have come before you and the best way to actually use those lessons. So is that a central theme throughout Stoicism, is sort of taking on the colour of the people that have come before you?
I mean, there are many metaphors that run through Stoicism that are kind of cool, and one of them is that Zeno was a dye merchant. The Phoenician people traded this purple dye called Tyrian or imperial purple. It came from the murex sea snail. So they would gather laboriously thousands of these sea snails and extract them and ferment them, and then they'd had to pick out this gland that they got the purple. It was the most disgusting job in history. Like, it was horrible. It must have stank to high heaven, and it took ages to get a small quantity of this stuff, but it was worth an absolute fortune. And Zeno was travelling with a load of it. He was quite wealthy from doing this, and his ship sank, and it all just dissolved back into the sea. So this thing that took ages then just dissolved back where it originally came from. It went back to where it came from, and it was gone. Like, there's no getting it back. There's no salvaging that. And so he ended up at Athens, and he said that his most profitable journey ever was the one where he lost all of his cargo, because that was what inspired him to have a kind of midlife crisis and start again from scratch and reinvent himself as a philosopher. It's like the best thing that ever happened to me was going bankrupt. Like, it's a strange thing. You kind of hear people saying that today. The best thing ever happened to me was losing my job. Like, and he's like one of the first people in history to kind of come out with that. And then he went to the Oracle at Delphi, which is like, it's over that way. It's just like, a few miles, like, it's just outside Athens. Yeah. And the Oracle said, you should take on the colour of dead men. And he thought, well, that's just typical. Like, this woman, the Pythia, like, just comes out with these really cryptic remarks. Like, that's no use to man nor beast. What am I supposed to make of that? And he went away and he had to think about it. And he thought, well, what she means is that instead of dyeing clothes with the colour of dead shellfish, like, for a living, like, you've got to make a living somehow, but like, instead of doing that, like, it's pointless, really. It's a complete vanity thing, right? But instead of doing that, what I should be doing is dyeing my character, dyeing my mind with the wisdom of dead men or dead philosophers from previous generations. And his favourite dead philosopher, I think it seems likely, we don't know for sure, but it seems like his favourite dead philosopher would have been Socrates, who's the quintessential Athenian philosopher anyway. And so then generations of Stoics sought to dye their minds. And Marcus Aurelius, 500 years later, he's still banging on about dyeing things purple. Like, he says to himself, he has purple robes because he's an emperor, and he says this is just sheep's wool dyed in shellfish gore. Like, it's like Napoleon said, a throne is just a bench covered in velvet. Who cares? It's like people make a big deal out of it. It's just it's a bench with some velvet on it, for goodness sakes. It doesn't mean anything. Like, it's all just symbolism and stuff. And Marcus kind of like says that about his sacred imperial robes, which is a remarkable thing for him to have said. And he says, I don't want my mind to become dyed with the office of Caesar and be corrupted. I think he thinks that Hadrian's mind, like, to mention it, like, go back to what we said a moment ago, was dyed purple and was dyed with the office of Caesar rather than being dyed with the wisdom of philosophers.
Thank you for watching this video. To listen to the full podcast, click the link in the description below.